Welcome everyone, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I want to welcome the Brattleboro Selectboard, New Hampshire DOT, members of the Wyndham Regional Planning and the Southwest Regional Planning, stakeholders, interested parties, public, and Vermont Transportation as well. It's a wonderful opportunity to share thoughts, ideas, and visions of what the sites could look like in the future. I remember being on the new bridge building committee, and I was on the existing bridge committee, but that could be four, maybe 5 years ago. Thank you. We're generally a casual group when we meet. A larger assembly like this, kindly respect the speakers, one person at a time. That's the obvious stuff. Direct questions to the speakers. I'm sure everything will go very smoothly. With any questions or comments, please stand up, state your name for the minutes, and that should be great. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that the first part of the meeting will have the presentation, and that meeting is between the Hinsdale Selectboard and the Brattleboro Selectboard. Any questions thereafter we can take from the public or anyone else thereafter. And then the other thing that I want to do is just make a quick introduction of presenters, boards, etc. My name is Steve DiOrio. I'm the chair of the board. I can go around the room. Selectman Richard Johnson, Selectman Mike Carrier, Selectman Bill Hodgman, Selectman Bernie Rideout, Jody Holmquist, our financial coordinator. Josh Green is our community development coordinator, and Kim Warden is our secretary. If Brattleboro Select Board would like to introduce their group, feel free to do that.
Great. Can you get the mic?
Richard Davis.
Daniel Quipp, chair of the board.
I'm Liz McLaughlin. I'm the vice chair of the Brattleboro Select Board.
Baby Bass. Franz Reichman. Also, there are members from either planning commission or any other folks presenting or that have a stake in this. If they want to stand up and introduce themselves, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. Just go ahead and have it. Yep.
Okay, I think we're going to use the public mic for our presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Dave Scott, who will introduce our presenters.
Hi, my name is David Scott, and I'm the administrator of the Bureau of Bridge Design for New Hampshire Department of Transportation. I've also assumed the role as project manager from the now retired Don Lyford for this project. Many of you interacted with Don. Tonight with me is, well, I don't know that JB even introduced himself. So we have JB Mack from the Southwest Regional Planning Commission. We have Gary LaRoche from the Vermont Agency of Transportation. We have Joseph Beeksha and Ed Weingartner from the design consulting firm of Hoyle Tanner and Associates. And they are under contract with the New Hampshire DOT to do the rehabilitation design for this project. I do want to thank all of you for coming out with great turnout. Let me start with the topic that caught so much attention throughout the years previous, and that is the ownership of the bridges. New Hampshire DOT is the owner of those two bridges, and although we don't want to own them, we have come to the realization that we are the people who have the asset responsibility right now. There has been discussion through the years of whether or not we should even have the bridges. Maybe a better option would be to take the bridges down. That said, when the new bridge was constructed, the environmental assessment and all the permitting work that was done to get us to the new bridge, including Section 106 and NEPA, included a commitment that I'm not sure if you can see from the back, but that New Hampshire DOT and V-Trans will minimally rehabilitate the existing Route 119 bridges in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standard for ped, bicycle, or an alternative transportation. So we have committed to maintain some type of ped bike access through there, and that was a condition of the permits that we got to get to the new bridge that you guys are enjoying today. I will also note that there were part of that process to get those permits included support letters from previous select boards. So there's been a commitment to this work. Also, I will finally add that the new bridge took advantage of a $12 million grant. And part of that $12 million grant was, again, a reiteration of the commitment to do minor preservation, minimal rehabilitation to maintain a ped and bike access. With that in mind, you're next, right? Let me check the script. Let me turn it over to JP.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming out tonight. Really good. I know that there's some extra chairs over here. I don't know if anyone's getting tired. I'm sure it's okay to grab some and sit down if you'd like. I'm JP Mack, and I'm an Assistant Director at Southwest Region Planning Commission. I've been working on this project for quite some time with, there was a project advisory committee that was developed that provided guidance on bridge design. We have a presentation for you tonight, and I'm just going to go through that a little bit. First, I want to talk about what the purpose of this meeting is, so we're really clear about what we're trying to communicate with the select boards. We're going to start off with me presenting some information because some of you may not have been around when the Project Advisory Committee and the Existing Bridges Committee were doing their work. But a lot of work was done, and we want to share that with you, make sure and let you know that there are resources and other information available should you have questions about that work. After that, David's going to, and his team from Boyle Tanner are going to go into some feedback that they're really looking to get to move forward on the rehabilitation of the two existing bridges. The Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge, which is the one on the Brattleboro side, and the Charles Dana Bridge, which is the one on the Hinsdale side. What we do with those bridges affects how the engineers progress on that project. And we have a team ready to go, but we really want to make sure that we're doing what the community wants to see out there. And then finally, we'll just stop at the end and assess how we're doing with our presentation in terms of meeting the objectives that we made for ourselves. So this is what we're hoping to do. First, we want to make sure that the select boards and the public are aware of research findings, public engagement activities, and resources that have been compiled relative to the work that's been done looking at the existing bridges in the Hinsdale Island. We're also hoping that we can start a discussion, a bi-state, bi-town discussion about a shared vision for the area. We're hoping that the select boards understand the scope project development process and guidance requested by New Hampshire DOT to move forward with the rehabilitation of the bridges. We're hoping to find out if the select boards are in favor of an idea that has come up, which is to consider leasing parts of the bridges and island for future use. And then finally, just want to make sure that we're responsive to any questions that you have. We don't have any, we know that this is a very complex topic, and this is a very challenging meeting to get all of this in, but we hope to at least get things started with this presentation, this meeting. So The existing bridge committee was formed in 2018, and it was developed by the project advisory committee. New Hampshire DOT traditionally develops a project advisory committee to guide, guide them on this design decisions that they have regarding the bridge. Make sure it meets sort of the values of the two communities. And very early on, we discovered there were always questions about the existing bridges. What are we going to do with those after we build the new bridge? And so we thought it was important to start get going on that work and start researching that, thinking about the possibilities. We brought in membership from both towns, people representing public safety, economic development, trail user groups, public health, and historic interest. We had co-chairs. These were town administrators or assistant town managers from the respective communities. We developed a charter, which essentially had 3 goals. Evaluate existing conditions. What's out there now, today? What do we need to learn and know about the islands and the bridges? Conduct public outreach and engagement activities to get a sense of what people want to see out there on the island bridges. And then develop a vision, at least to try to get some momentum going and some consensus about what could happen out there. They had 9 meetings between January 2018 and March 2021. And there were, because this was during COVID, public engagement was actually pretty challenging, but we did have 3 online public forums during that time. And some of the things that we went through, some of the things that we looked at was community, getting an understanding of socioeconomics in the area. We looked at master plans, we looked at the zoning of both of the communities. We talked with local police in both sides of the river and heard a great deal about concerns about substance use, homelessness on the island, and litter, all those kinds of things associated with the island. We had key abutter interviews, meaning we talked with the folks at Norm's Marina at the time, the Whetstone at the time, and also Brattleboro Museum is another example. All of those folks had a strong vested interest in making sure whatever happened, was going to be compatible with their uses and what they're trying to do with their property. We had key stakeholder consultations. We met with trails groups. We met with representatives from Abenaki. We had the Connecticut River Conservancy who brought a lot of information to us about, environmental concerns and recreational interests with, let's say, paddlers on the river. The New Hampshire Geological Survey was really helpful. We learned from them that the island since the 1960s has actually been pretty much the same shape or form. It's actually grown a little bit, but it's completely, most of the island is river sediment, as you'd imagine. And there's only, the only other fill on there there's fill for the roadbed, but it's mostly just river sediment. So vegetation is really important to hold that island together. We talked to New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and learned if we want to do things on the island, it's likely that we're going to have to go through some wetlands permitting and shoreline permitting. We talked about things like docks, kayaking, landing spots, bathrooms, those kinds of things. And you get the picture. I won't go through everyone. So we did a lot of research. The other thing we did is we engaged the public and we put out a public survey. One of the surveys was about what should the goals for the island and bridge development be? And you see 6 goals here. 5 of the goals actually come from goals that were developed to build a new bridge, the General John Stark Bridge. One was added though, and that was to ensure that the area is safe and clean. That was front of mind for all the public. And you can see the percentages here. All of these, everything from ensure area is safe and clean down to enhance recreation opportunities and river access, promote active transportation, meaning walking and bicycling. We had a pretty good majority on all of these types of goals. In the public survey, we also asked what people would like. We already knew, based on the commitments that David was just talking about, that people will be walking, biking, probably jogging on the island and bridges in the future. But is there anything else that you want to see? It seems like a good opportunity. So we asked, what are some other things that people really want to see with respect to the bridges? 75% said wildlife, scenic viewing. Many people were influenced by this idea of Sherburne Bridge of Flowers. Probably many of you are familiar with. And this idea of flowers and vegetation on the bridge. Seating areas, picnic tables, fishing, etc. And then for the island, similar types of values. Wildlife scenic viewing was at the top again. Wildlife habitat. There would seem to be a strong interest in bringing the island back to, conserving the environmental, this environmental asset in the middle of the river, but also to bring recreational opportunities to people around in the two communities. So we talked about, people also commented on wanting to have boating, fishing, and swimming, and so forth. I mentioned that the third charge that we had was to develop a vision, and we actually engaged with University of Massachusetts Amherst students. First was an undergrad class that was taking a landscape architecture class, and then we worked with a master's degree candidate, and he put together some visuals to help people to try to match what people were saying in the public forums and in the surveys information that we received. And so he created a concept called the Living River, Balancing Recreation and Conservation along the Hinsdale Island Greenway. You can see people jogging, but you can see also like native vegetation and trying to bring ecosystem back to the island. And a lot of this information you can find on Southwest Region Planning Commission's website. If you want to come see me later and you're interested in learning more about that, I can share this information further. But he essentially came up with everything from a kayaker's cove here to boardwalk docks, a plaza where food trucks could go and people could come and get food and picnic out on the island. Several viewing platforms. For little kids, there's something called a rock scramble where kids could, play on the rocks going up a hill. There was this idea of doing a restroom, which we talked to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services about how to go through that, and several viewing platforms. And these are some of the pictures he put together just to, here you can see use of the bridge where the Whetstone bar owner at the time had actually expressed an interest in having tables that came out onto the Anahunt Marsh Bridge. And so he tried to capture that a little bit with a little picture here. Here you can see the food trucks on the main part of the island, and here is this concept of doing an amphitheater on the island. See the Kayaker's Cove, boardwalk for other kinds of boating, rock scramble. And so that's just to give you a sense of what kind of work that's already been done on this. So there's a lot of information we've collected over time. Understanding public attitudes and preferences, and trying to be responsive to public needs. You may have heard in the grapevine or not that there's a local entrepreneur that's interested in leasing the bridges in the island space. So there's already interest. We're seeing active interest in people interested in doing something with the island and the bridges. So we're later about this idea of leasing. But we also know that maintenance and public safety continues to be a big concern. And at the same time, New Hampshire DOT is very eager to get going to do its rehabilitation work on the existing bridges. I'm going to hand it back now to David Scott.
I need more hands. One thing that has come up with some regularity is the topic of the island. Who owns it? And although there was some online information that suggested that with state of New Hampshire being with maintenance responsibilities falling to our New Hampshire's Division of Natural and Cultural Resources, we did an awful lot of research and can't substantiate that. As New Hampshire DOT now understands it, New Hampshire DOT is responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that island. That said, it's a low value, not low value, but low priority asset for it. We're not putting a lot of anything into that island. You saw some great ideas as to how to use that island. Those are great ideas. New Hampshire DOT is not underwriting any of that. That said, we are open to the idea of a lease, and the option that has been kicked around would potentially be a 10-year lease. That said, our construction project is going to take a couple years to complete. So whether, and it will be at least 2027 before we can do that start that 2-year construction window. The lease would have to, if the lease was executed prior to start of construction, it would have to include some type of language that said, hey, during the 2 years when construction is underway, anything that has been leased has got to get out of the way for the construction. Two last slides before I turn it over. This document here, Guide for the Development of Bicycle Facilities, that speaks to what is appropriate ped and bike access. And this document is suggesting a shared use path has to be 10 feet wide with 2-foot shoulders on each side. So that's, you can do the math here, that's 14 feet. The bridge, rail to rail, is 20 foot 4 inches, so that only leaves 6 foot 4 inches of uncommitted space. So some of those things that were suggested for the activities on the bridge, sitting areas, picnic tables, limited width. But I did want to continue talking about, just for a moment, the lease proposal as I last heard it, and that was to provide some seating area for the restaurant on the upstream Brattleboro side. That'll be something more later on, I'm sure. And this other document, whose name escapes me now, but it's talking about how you can put sidewalk tables. This came out, I think this was coming out and being highlighted during COVID when people were looking for on-street dining. And you can't see it from where you're sitting, I'm sure, but that's showing 6 foot. Who knew? So a proposal or a suggestion that, hey, you can get a decent dining area for 6 feet. That would leave the extra 14 feet for the shared use path. And so that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Remembering that every foot of bridge deck, imagining that this was the length of the bridge and we were looking at the bridge right now, every table that you would consider leasing is that much space that isn't available for some of those vision things that came up through the project advisory. With that, I am going to turn over to Ed, who is going to discuss some of the nuances and details of the bridge rehabilitation.
Good evening. As David mentioned, my name is Ed Weingartner with Loyal Town Associates. I'm the project engineer for this project. So as David mentioned, the available clear deck width is 20 foot 4 inches. We have to maintain 14 feet of that for a travel way for both pedestrians, as well as emergency or maintenance vehicles. The Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge, which is the bridge on the Brattleboro side, the sidewalk has to remain on that bridge because that was original to its construction. However, for the Charles Dana Bridge, the sidewalk was added in 1993, so being that it's not part of the original construction, that's going to be removed. So I've got some photos on the next 2 slides that show some condition, and you can see that active corrosion and rusting is well underway on the structure. So the rehabilitation measures right now are to just repair truss members with advanced deterioration and section loss. That includes some of the stringers, the truss members above the deck, truss members below the deck. We're going to rehabilitate the bearings. We'll replace some of the lower lateral bracing for the trusses because there's some very bad, serious deterioration there. So some of those members need to be replaced. We're also going to do a full paint coating removal and replacement. We're also going to repair the bridge decks. Rehabilitate the expansion joints as part of that. We're going to install a new wearing surface. Back, I believe, in 2003 or so, some work was done on the bridge decks. That is basically a bare bridge deck on the bottom left photo that had a thin layer of an aggregate epoxy wearing surface on it, which is completely worn off now, so we're restoring that. The lower right photo shows kind of an example of the Charles Dana Bridge. That's one of the piers that need rehabilitation. You can see the upper right photo shows the hole on one of the vertical members. So, as part of the project, we'll also install either gates or removable bollards at the New Hampshire end and the Vermont end. And then as David and JB had indicated, some of the other things we took a look at were possibly adding amenities to the structure. Planters, art installations, benches, things of that, planters and things of that nature. I think David already covered that. With the 14 feet, we only have about 6'4" of available space to put these items. So for bridge loading, the bridge has to be able to carry its own weight, plus any burdens that we add to it. It also has to carry pedestrian loading, the maintenance vehicle, which is going to be a 10-ton, 2-axle truck, and emergency vehicles, ambulance, and police cruiser. This bridge also is going to have to carry snow load. Currently, the New Hampshire DOT policy is to not plow recreational bridges. And we'll have to have combinations of these loads as required by code. So this is just an example, a picture of what the 10-ton truck looks like. So we got some initial information regarding the amenities a few years back, and so we had a plant box that would say 38 by 38 by 27. We had a number of them for each of the 2 bridges. Same for the park benches, bar tables, and various art installations. So with that, we're going to talk more about that a little later on in the presentation, but we also have to cover some environmental resource and impacts. I want to give you an update there. So NEPA was completed in 2013, but it has to undergo a reevaluation because of the time period that's lapsed from that period to today. There are several protected federal and state species that are in the project area. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and New Hampshire Fish and Game consultation is ongoing. Any final determinations made, any work we do will include avoidance and minimization of conservation activities. So there are wetlands and surface waters. The Connecticut River is a New Hampshire DES protected shoreline. And it's also a designated river, and it's going to have unavoidable impacts. Wetlands that have been identified within New Hampshire and none on the Vermont side. So for permitting, we're looking at New Hampshire DES and United States Army Corps of Engineers will be needed based on final design impacts. And there are also several invasive species that were identified in the project area, and those will be, a management plan will be needed for those prior to construction. With that, I'll turn it back over to David.
Thanks. So, this is where we start looking for some input. This is your meeting, so I'm going to just hit some of the highlights of things that we are looking for some guidance on. The first thing that we are hoping to see some guidance on, here's some guidance on tonight, is the idea of leasing part of the bridge, or all of them. The opportunities for space are limited with just that 6'4" area. But if you are active, I guess I want to put it this way. There were, again, great ideas from the project advisory committee, and some of those might be limited if space is leased. But we need to know what the will of both towns is. And if so, would it be just a request for proposal? Would it be a non-competitive type process? Or would it be some other idea? We can talk about that later on as we go through the night. The other idea, the other thing we're looking for is some information as to how to advance the engineering here. This whole thing is kind of a dance. When I design a highway bridge, I have a book that's 3 volumes that thick telling me what type of loads I need to apply to my bridge. And yet, in this situation, we can tweak that a little bit. And with the limited structural capacity, we want to make sure we optimize and make the best of our funds. So, preliminary structural analysis says that there is a capacity for some amenities. The amenity that loads the bridge can support is based on the current condition, but it also is conditional on where we actually place some of those loads and consideration of the amenities, the emergency vehicles, pedestrians. So, I would like to be able to give guidance hopefully tonight. And one of the big questions that we can all help with is just the simple question of where do you want the shared use path? Should the shared use path be right down the center of the bridge? Didn't mean to hit that one. Right down the center of the bridge with 3'2" on each side and then 14-foot shared use path here. Or to put the 14-foot on one side of the bridge, thus preserving all 6'4" for the use of these 4 amenities as visioned by the project advisory committee and you all tonight. With that, that's yours.
Yeah, I think I forgot to pause for questions. Let's take some questions now. We're really interested in hearing from both select boards, questions and comments that you have. We heard David's DOT's request for information. I saw a hand up. Is there another microphone that can be used for the select board? Can you pass it down? Sure.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you for this presentation, and I know from experience, because I participated in some of these visioning things, that a lot of planning and visioning has gone into this, and I understand a great deal about the NEPA process, and I'll ask you about that. My fundamental question, it revolves around ownership, maintenance, and money. And it's a question that I have to call, is Daddy paying for the wedding?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Is Daddy paying for the wedding?
Because we're gone down a road of visioning and planning without knowing the fundamental question that Brattleboro has, and I'm sure Hinsdale has, is New Hampshire DOT paying for the improvements to the bridge, the ongoing maintenance of whatever is designed, and the design itself.
New Hampshire DOT is committed to the rehabilitation in cooperation with V-Trend. We are currently on the hook also for future maintenance, but this is a low priority asset for us. And not carrying transportation. If we could find someone else who would be interested in owning a bridge, we'd be happy to discuss with you. But as it stands now, and per the agreements that we set forward with the PA and NEPA 106, it is New Hampshire DOT/V-Trans responsibility for future maintenance.
So the NEPA requirement is that New Hampshire DOT provides ongoing maintenance. Right now, I know that there's a question of poison sumac on the island. Is New Hampshire DOT going to maintain the island starting this spring?
New Hampshire DOT, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are the responsible for the asset of the island, but it is a very low priority for us. We don't take care of maintenance alongside our traveled roads. So to take care of sumac or these invasive species next to recreational island is just something that's not going to be our focus.
That's one question. But the ultimate question is this visioning and this parkland and so forth. I know that the leasing is a bright and shiny object, but absent that leasing and absent taking a public amenity and making it private, all the years of planning that went on beforehand assumed development. Is New Hampshire DOT going to be responsible for the cost of that development?
No. And John Leifert made that clear during some of those project advisory committee meetings. We're here to figure out what it is that the towns and the project advisory committees see as a final use for this island, but we don't have skin in the game for that.
So I really think that the public should be cautioned that what you're really asking is for these two towns to assume financial responsibility for a bridge that you own.
We are committing to the rehabilitation. We are responsible for the ongoing maintenance, but for the island, that's beyond anything that we would be putting on.
Because I'd love to hear Hinsdale's thoughts, but Brattleboro, yes, pretty strapped.
Let's hear Hinsdale, 100%.
I tend to agree with Elizabeth. There is a cost. There is obviously a responsibility. The Hinsdale Selectboard was very cautious about the maintenance and the cost of. Those bridges are closest to Brattleboro downtown, and they're furthest away from Hinsdale downtown. So we've got to figure out a mix or a share percentage, depending what happens. We've heard from private parties that would like to do something, and that's exciting to us. I didn't know if in the maintenance of those two bridges, the Anna Hunt and the Charles Dana, will they be lit? Is that part of the maintenance?
Lighting will not be part of our contract. We have no lighting on this. It is feasible that it could be part of the lease arrangement, depending on what the proposals are.
Okay. And then the other question, which is just a minor question, why does the Anna Hunt, why is it 14 feet? Can it be less to make more room for a private entrepreneur?
I reached out to New Hampshire DOT's active transportation engineer. Used to be called the bike ped engineer. And he said 14 foot is what we should be moving for,
Okay.
because it sounded big to me too.
Anyone else? Any questions from the board? Comments?
Same concerns.
Yeah.
Anyone else on the select boards? Want to chime in?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
No.
No, I think it's microphone. Let me try turning it off and turn it on again. How about now? Yes. Okay, thank you. It's really good to see so many people out here today. I was actually wondering whether anyone would show up, and so to see representation from both towns and both communities, speaks to how important this is for everybody. In the public engagement work that was done during the early part of the pandemic, the major priority that came out of it was that this space be kept safe and clean. And so I think that that's really where I think we should center our conversation around, around questions of maintenance, safety, and it's a really challenging project, right? Because this is 2 states, 2 towns. And as Steve just pointed out, this is geographically very far away from the Hinsdale downtown area, but culturally feels very much part of Brattleboro's downtown, even though legally and financially it's just not. So how can we kind of seek to find some kind of agreement about how to keep this a safe and clean area? And I hear there's a kind of a rush to lease, and I think that the public is owed a better public process around that. I think that if after a public process, the towns do say leasing seems like the best option, then great, but let's have a better public process around that.
Can I, one thing that we didn't quite describe when we were talking about the lease arrangement was this idea of opening up opening up to the public to see what kind of responses we might get for leasing interest. Just as an example, I've spoken with Danny Lichtenfeld from Brattleboro Museum, who's expressed interest in earlier on when we were doing this project and maybe having some programming on the bridges and island. So there might be more than one person out there that's interested in the island. But I think the other part of leasing is the idea of gaining some financial interest from someone to help maintain the bridge, or because it's my understanding, David, you want to talk about what the leasing payments would be used for?
Sure. I did discuss this with our Bureau of Right-of-Way, the people who are responsible for doing these arrangements, and the feedback I got from them was any monetary value, any monies that came in from a lease arrangement would have to go into a sequestered account, because this is a federal aid eligible structure, both bridges are. We have to take any monies that we receive because of the bridge and put them back into the bridge with regards to future maintenance. So keep its own little separate bank account to tally up however much money the lease might bring in, and then as we do future maintenance, draw from that account such that we maintain our federal aid eligibility. Can you use the mic?
So you said that the lease money would become a fund to support future maintenance.
Yes.
So the lease money could not be used to support future development.
I believe that is correct, because I do not believe the island is federally eligible.
Or even future development of either bridge.
We could use, when you say development of the bridge,
I mean programming, all the visioning that was discussed, the planters, benches, blah.
no, those things would not be as I understand it, those things would not be federally participating.
So we're just talking about offsetting your maintenance costs.
To keep the bridge in its best condition for the use of Hinsdale and Brattleboro.
Which is, presently speaking, your responsibility.
Yes. But we're going to, I admittedly, we're going to have a funding challenge to find funds for future maintenance. And this pot of money would go towards that.
I have a question about the potential leasing. If a leasing agreement was created, from a legal point of view, would Vermont have any standing or control of that lease, or would that be completely a legal process that's controlled by New Hampshire?
I believe it's all New Hampshire. It would be completely controlled by New Hampshire. That said, the project advisory committee was populated by both towns, so it would seem right that you would have a seat at the table to evaluate any of these proposals such that, you know, this is, again, closer to you guys than it is to him.
Well, thanks for a lot of information. In your most recent comments, it strikes me that the lease arrangement might be different for the bridges and for the island, and that you would have, that it would be required that any money that came in for leases on the bridges went to maintenance of bridges, from what you said. But that doesn't necessarily apply to money that came in for leasing any island area for purposes, and you know, in fact, might need separate leases for purposes that are essentially unitary. It's just really saying it gets fairly complicated. But my bigger question is actually a little different than that, which is when this project is done, whatever it looks like, then there will be, you know, improvements in place that then will require maintenance in and of themselves, and we're looking out 5, 10 years or whatever it is. And so New Hampshire DOT would be responsible for keeping the bridges in good shape, making sure they don't fall into the river, structural soundness of the bridges. But then the islands would not be covered by anything, any payments for New Hampshire DOT, and that money would have to come from elsewhere. Is that actually sort of how it lines up?
I see the wisdom in having two separate leases and agree that the lease for the island, that money would not have to be quite so sequestered. I'm going to, full disclosure, I do bridge design, and this is the first time I've tried to navigate a lease situation. So I'm learning on the fly, and I'm not ashamed to say it.
DOT may have a somewhat, I don't know this, but DOT may have some interest in the pavement or the way, travel way between the two bridges to make sure that that's, you know, in good shape. But other than that, I don't think there's going to be much interest in the island itself.
Okay, well, thank you.
So, a quick question. You mentioned a few times that once this bridge is brought back to order and safety, that it would no longer be a priority to New Hampshire DOT. With a lease arrangement, does that change? I mean, you're effectively the landlord, and if there's a problem, does that reprioritize that thinking?
I believe so. It depends how much is needed. I mean, if we're going to enter into a 10-year lease, we're committing to 10 years of a leasable asset.
I just have a very basic question. So it's been said a couple of times tonight that New Hampshire DOT owns these bridges. In our kind of like build up to this meeting, we were checking in about ownership, and you know the state line is very close, like, it's not in the middle of the river, right? So at the bank, I think. And in checking in about this, it seemed like Vermont owned some very small percentage of these bridges. Is that accurate?
The abutment is actually, I'm going to turn this over to Gary LaRoche because he understands the nuance between the interplay between Vermont Agency of Transportation and Brattleboro.
Certainly, thanks, David. So just for clarification, V-Trans, or the state line is the ordinary low water mark of the Connecticut River. So
raise your mic.
Yeah, can you use your mic?
Oh, my apologies. I'm not terrible with mics. The state line is the ordinary low water mark of the Connecticut River. So the portion of the bridge in the state of Vermont of the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge is 7% of the superstructure, and it includes the abutment.
What? I just has a follow-up to that.
And what is the arrangement between Vermont Agency of Transportation and Brattleboro?
So the Vermont Agency of Transportation would be required to enter into a finance and maintenance agreement with the town of Brattleboro, memorializing what the town's share of the bridge project is and what the future maintenance responsibilities of these truss bridges are. Generally, we use pretty standardized language in our finance and maintenance agreements, but before we can enter into that finance and maintenance agreement, we need to understand the funding sources for the project in essence, perpetuity or the NEPA process. So for the bridge project construction, there's legislation in place, I believe it's Act 158, 153, where the town of Brattleboro has a 0% share in the construction of the rehabilitation project. But to speak to future maintenance, I have to refer to New Hampshire DOT on how it's interpreted for federal funding, and if it's state funding, or how that funding split's broke up, or where those funds are coming from. And for the NEPA process, pardon me, just gathering my thoughts. For that NEPA process, assuring that we have that funding in perpetuity, so we don't have an adverse effect, and how a memorandum of understanding is written as part of that NEPA process. So I think there's more to come, David, on this funding subject and how it's all broke up.
Thanks, Gary. Can I just follow up on that real quick? So we were just working with Gary and V-Trans on another bridge in our town recently, and the town share of that project was 5%. Which ended up being a pretty substantial sum of money, which Gary worked with us on, and that was great. We haven't actually yet signed that financial agreement, but we're probably going to do that pretty soon. So I think the people of Brattleboro really, would need to know what they're potentially on the hook for further down the road before we kind of go too much further into saying which direction to go.
One thing I would like to add is the state of Vermont and New Hampshire DOT have a statewide bridge maintenance agreement where New Hampshire DOT leads in the maintenance efforts, and part of that agreement is coordination with V-Trans or the town entity, whoever's the owner of that bridge, or reimbursement. If that's the case.
So, some of this, it seems to me, depends on what use is actually made of the bridge and the islands. For example, if the only use that's made of it is for walking and biking between two sides of the river, then it strikes me that the maintenance, the ongoing expenses, would be related to those transportation modalities, which would more be the responsibility of the two transportation agencies. If there were purposes beyond that, such as, you know, even very minimal stuff like picnic tables, or bigger stuff like seating for a restaurant, food trucks, and amphitheater, etc., then clearly those ongoing expenses would be beyond what we could expect from the transportation agencies. But I guess what I'm asking is, am I right? If this were maintained really as an outdoor recreational space where the only organized activity is going across from one side to the other, then wouldn't it mean that your two agencies would be responsible for all or almost all of the ongoing expenses?
Per the agreements that we showed earlier, New Hampshire DOT and V-Trans are currently on the hook for. If the use is, and the use would be, at most, an occasional ambulance going to the island to help somebody out, these bridges aren't going to get road salted, so the deterioration is going to slow down significantly. Maintenance will be less needed than it is today. That said, everything has a finite life, and yes, that's understood. I'm not sure that I answered your question.
Correct.
So do you want another try?
Well, if there's nothing there except the road and the path, then doesn't that mean that you guys get to pay for the ongoing maintenance?
The nuance, I think, is that with the new bridge having plenty of shoulder width, plenty of sidewalk, that is the transportation for the pent bikes, and we would view the, and I have not talked about this with Gary, suspicious he's would confirm that the use of the trusses is entirely recreational. It's not that those two bridges would be part of the transportation network, even in the sense of active transportation. That said, again, as the agreements are currently written, New Hampshire DOT and V-Trans are responsible for ongoing maintenance.
Yes, listening to everything that people are talking about this evening, it would seem to me that this could be easily fixable with the language in your lease agreement between the town of Hinsdale, town of Brattleboro, for maintenance. Town of Brattleboro is obviously concerned about the maintenance on the 7% of the bridges you mentioned. I think that all could be taken care of in the lease agreement.
Questions. The first, you mentioned ambulance. The question remains, which municipal entity would be responsible for public safety?
I'm going to tactfully say not the state of New Hampshire.
Right. So these are the issues.
Understood.
Let's go back to what you were just talking about in terms of the fact that the new bridge has pedestrian and bicycle access. Was the original NEPA permit condition such that this old bridge, the Marsh bridges, would be maintained as a public pedestrian and bicycle access way because the new bridge didn't have such an item? Or was the new bridge always designed to have pedestrian and bicycle access, and the old bridge is in addition to?
You stumped me. I don't have the history of the project, but just JB looks like he does.
In just reviewing the NEPA document, the environmental assessment document, my interpretation is that the new bridge was always going to have a sidewalk, and also provide for bicycles. And so it would be the latter, based on my reading of the environmental assessment.
Well, I think it's worth looking into because NEPA issues can be met in a number of ways. And if the new bridge provides superior access than what was originally identified, it's also a possibility that whatever that you're expending now to rehabilitate the old bridges, you can tell me how many millions of dollars that is. $9.3 million?
Yeah, the budget's around $10 million.
So, is that coming from this NEPA grant, or is that coming from the state of New Hampshire?
That's coming from federal funds that New Hampshire and V-Trans jointly receive. And that expenditure, again, was a commitment that we made when we received the $12 million grant for the loop.
It seems out of proportion to be maintaining these bridges when you're not going to be responsible for doing anything else. It seems like you're spending $10 million to repair these two bridges, build a pathway, and then say, meh. Like, you're not really completing the task of the visioning that was done. You're merely setting the table for it by maintaining the two bridges. And so all the visioning and planning that was done is not included in this federal money that you received. And it's now up to these two cash-strapped towns to do the great vision. And I just don't think that's fair.
Yeah, I just respond by saying that I think the visioning all along was, it should have been understood that that was not going to be funded by DOT funding. That grants would need to go out for federal grants or raise funds to make a vision possible. And vision was also just ideas to stimulate conversation on what the two communities might like to see in that space, particularly when there's a concern about crime and issues on the island, public safety issues on the island, and sort of making sure that that space is active.
I'd like to, at this time, open it up for public comment. Of course, if any of the boards have any questions at all, get my attention and I'll hand you the mic. But anyone that stands up from the public, please do stand up, state your name, and use the microphone in the center of the room. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nancy Rouse. I'm on the Vermont side. And I guess I'm a little surprised. No one's talked at all, and I know these people, all of you work for towns, but I think that there's opportunities for getting volunteers involved. The federal government is going to not be funding anything new under Trump. They're basically in the process of taking all the funding away from towns and municipalities. So I don't think that's something we are going to be getting. And I do feel like, personally, I came here to say I want to volunteer volunteer on this project. I don't want to get paid, I'm retired, and I'm happy to do it. My first thought was get a collection of people to pick up all the garbage on those bridges, and I would be happy to organize that. But I think that at this time, what we're looking at with all the changes going on in the United States is we're going to all have to consider looking at volunteer labor as part of this project. And I think that that's really something we're going to be looking at in the future, but I do believe that it's pretty important at this time to consider that, or we may not have a project at all.
Hi, I'm Frances Boucher, resident of Hinsdale. Getting back to the $10 million and the grant funding, federal grants, is making me nervous. Do we already have some of that money secured? Okay, all of it? Oh, I took your money. I'm sorry.
That money was received, the grant money was received and spent on the new bridge, and we had made a commitment that when we received that money and spent it, we would follow up with investment into the rehabilitation of the existing trusses.
Okay. Is there money there to move forward right now tomorrow on the bridge? One more question. And if not, if all of a sudden overnight, somehow, we know these things happen, we do not receive more funds, what obligation is Hinsdale property tax wise going to be putting some of this, or is the DOT going to take this from state funds to help state funds?
We are looking for any funds from Hinsdale, and if costs escalated wildly, let me back up. This project is funded in the 10-year plan, so the legislature has already given the thumbs up to moving forward with this project. And if inflation chewed up, inflation raised prices on all the other projects such that we didn't have funds for this, it would just mothball. But we do have a commitment to do this and a project to do this. Engineers on board to design this, so it's moving forward.
Any other questions?
Paul Burgo from Clark Street, Brattleboro. Just wondering if the New Hampshire Department of Transportation has ever retired part of their infrastructure out of the transportation infrastructure, resulting in the responsibility for that structure, whether a bridge or anything, falling into some other jurisdiction. And if not, then what would prevent that from happening way down the road in this case?
I'm not sure that we ever have handed over, that's a great question, maintenance to another entity. Not that I can recall. I'm not going to say it's never happened. We've taken assets, we've removed assets from our inventory by dismantling. Can't remember when we've taken one down.
Parking rides? Parking ride lot, maintenance responsible. All I can think of is just, and I don't know if this really addresses your question, but I know that some of the parking ride lots that were state property are being taken by bus companies over on the eastern side of the state. They get those.
I do bridges. I don't do bridges. Any other further questions?
I'll give it right back to you. So Chris Campion, Executive Director, Winter Regional Commission in Southeast Vermont. So you guys have, everybody's had a lot of information thrown at them. I don't know what your capacity is to make decisions tonight on this case. But I've been on the existing bridges discussion group, or whatever we're calling it. And of course, one of the questions for you guys too, that's really challenging, are what are the costs of not doing anything? and what becomes of activity on the bridge if you don't have other very positive activity displacing what could be very negative activity, which gets to the public safety responsibilities and other things. So I'm a planner, I'm a landscape architect. You know, in my experience, the more positive activity you have, the more it's going to displace negative activity. And we'll probably see, starting this spring, as construction works begins, what's going to transpire in the absence of a lot of positive activity. So you'll kind of have, you know, a lot of drill there. The other thing too is one of the things I'm really encouraged by in all of this is that you guys are all here together. In my perfect world, I'm a planner, so I kind of have this utopian view of what is possible. That I would love to see Brattleboro and Hinsdale engage in more conversations about development activity for the benefit of both towns, including like what are the economic development, community development benefits to Hinsdale for real, like how might this factor in on that end of Hinsdale as you approach, you know, George's Field in that area, and are there opportunities for partnership? And I suspect, I'm real nervous about federal grants too, but like Northern Border Regional Commission, they might be willing to fund kind of a by-town conversation about development in that downtown Brattleboro, downtown Hinsdale corridor. Not trying to make things complex, but you guys may want to consider some continued means of conversation back and forth with each other about how do we make the most of this situation for the benefit of both towns? Because, you know, to some points that we made earlier, I think we're going to have to be more self-reliant. Within that self-reliance, I think more mutual engagement is going to be really important. So I just wanted to put those two things out there, not trying to complicate anything, but to me, there's some real opportunities here. Yes.
My name is Rebecca Todd. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut River Conservancy. I want to thank the state agencies for their presentation tonight. Thank the select boards of Hinsdale and Brattleboro. I actually live in Chesterfield and I paddle in that row right here. I'd like to say that the Connecticut River Conservancy, we're a nonprofit operating in the entire Connecticut River watershed. We have offices in New Hampshire and in Vermont and Brattleboro. We are very interested in this project. We are particularly interested in making sure that we have public access and that we are preserving and protecting the natural resources in the Connecticut River, in particular, the island. We are happy to continue to help with this, and I want to echo what Chris said, which is, I think we have a tremendous opportunity here, and I think we should recognize that this is a gift that has been given to us to think about how we want to construct this part of our world. We can argue about who's maintaining the lights and what we do about safety, or we can think in a grander way with some vision about what would it look like in a perfect world. How can we, is this the vision we want? If so, let's work cooperatively, as Chris says, to try and make that a reality. If the communities and the states are willing to do that, the Connecticut River Conservancy is happy to help, particularly if it involves public access and the protection and preservation of natural resources. That's my comment. I do have a question. We've heard a lot about who's responsible for the island. My question is, who owns the island?
The state of New Hampshire.
Any particular entity within the state of New Hampshire, or just the
New
state?
Hampshire DOT is the taxpayer tasked with maintenance of that island. Again, it's a low priority asset for the state, for New Hampshire Department of Transportation, but
So it is owned by the state of New Hampshire and DOT maintains.
Yes. Yes.
But it's not a state park.
It is not a state park. No.
I'll take it.
My My name's Edwin Smith, I live in Hinsdale, and I have been on various committees from the 1986, I think it was, when Governor Sununu and Governor Kuhn got the disagreement over where the bridge was going to go, and we started all over again, and here we are with a new bridge in December. But beyond that, I think what we should direct to our select people here today is that we would like to see them pursue a lease or some other form of passing the responsibility of the bridge on to someone else, because I don't think either select board is eager to be responsible for the bridge in any way, shape, or form unless it is in a private setting. I don't think either Hinsdale or Brattleboro, I'm only assuming from Brattleboro and Hinsdale, but I don't think that we want to have a park that's maintained by the towns themselves. I think we have enough tax burdens without passing that on and having a park or something, facility that the towns are responsible for. So I think we should give a message to the select boards that we would like to see them pursue any type of private enterprise to take this over, take the lead, and go forward with it. Yes. Maybe people disagree with me, but that's my standpoint.
Any other questions?
May I speak to that? Just one concern that I've already mentioned it before. I don't understand fully leases, so I don't know how much money a lease would generate. It won't be the end all be all, but just don't want you to think that a lease with.
I don't think they do, but they can pursue it, that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me? Richard Johnson, member of the Hinsdale Board of Selectmen. And by the way, my term is up next March. So if you don't like anything I have to say tonight, make a check back on your calendar, make sure to vote against it. Because I have a way of speaking my mind. Hinsdale and Brattleboro missed an opportunity. Those two bridges should be gone. They would then be what New Hampshire has lived by and prided itself in: boating, fishing, swimming. Recreation, which was what we would have now, and we wouldn't be arguing about who's going to pay for the shore. I mean, it was the right thing to do at the time. It got passed by. Here we are with a pig in a poke. Both Brattleboro and Hinsdale do not have extra money to go building parks and recreation, and while thinking of it as a perfect world is great, I haven't found that perfect guy with all the money yet. Grants are great to spend other people's money on something that you wouldn't spend your own on, and that's the way I've always thought of that. If it was that great, why would you spend your own money on it? Why would you have to worry about a grant? The Board of Selectmen has many conversations on it, and believe me, we have a ton of other things that we can spend our money on, other than improving the islands and the bridges. That's, let's face it, state-of-the-art roads.
Any further questions?
We have one other.
I would like to interrogate Kathy Erfer, if she's here, or other members of the Connecticut River Conservancy regarding the FERC application and whether or not there's any funds available from the FERC dam application. Kathy, thank you.
There are no funds available now. So, I'm sorry, yeah, Kathy Erfer, I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for Connecticut River Conservancy. I live in Brattleboro as well. So we've been engaged in the relicensing for over a decade. At the moment, there are no funds available, but what we've been arguing for is that for Great River Hydro, as part of their relicensing, they should mitigate for the presence of the dams. The form of mitigation can be, one of the forms of mitigation can be providing recreational access. It is possible through FERC relicensing that, that could look like them buying the island and possibly providing recreational access on it. It could be them leasing the island and providing recreational access on it. There is no guarantee that they would do that. that is one potential option, as is, the town of Brattleboro having a long-term lease on the island, right? I feel like if the municipalities have some control over the island, you have access to grant funds that you will not necessarily have access to if there's a private entity leasing the island. So while it may seem like there's money coming in, you may be shooting yourself in the foot because you're not able to access other forms of money that could come in if the municipalities control it. I feel like the concept of potentially Great River Hydro, we have no idea how that's going to unfold. Possibility, but absolutely not a guarantee and no money at this moment.
Okay, any other questions?
Don't worry.
Michael Barba, Hinsdale. Just a question. The grant application that was processed for the new bridge, a portion of that, in that application, there were stipulations that the old bridges have to stay as some type of bike path, walking path. Yes. Walking path. You got a brand new bridge with a beautiful sidewalk, nice spot halfway across, look out over the water.
I was very instrumental in the design of the new bridge and overseeing the staff that did a great job with that, but the negotiations and the project management that brought us to that, I can't answer. Do you have any background, Jimmy?
It's just as well known.
I can say that, again, reading the environmental assessment document that was sort of set up a lot of the negotiations here. It's my understanding that state historical offices, it seems on both sides of the river, expressed that these bridges were historic and thought that they thought it was important to keep them preserved. Now, is that a good answer to your question? Not necessarily, but it is, I think, part of the reason that they're there today. And again, I think David mentioned earlier, the two states agreed to that. The previous select boards agreed to it. This is where we are.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you. I'm Wendy Harrison. I'm a state senator. I live in Brattleboro, and also working on the relicensing of the dams. And because the state of Vermont defines water quality to include recreation, there is an opportunity to get some funding from Great River Hydro for recreation, which could be used in this setting. We'll know relatively soon, and the process has been going on for 10 years. We'll know within, I'd say, 2 years, probably earlier. So that's helpful, and that's within your maintenance and time period. It's really helpful to know that the two bridges will be maintained by New Hampshire. And I guess one question I do have, once you do that work to make them structurally sound, do you have an estimate of the cost of ongoing maintenance? Because I would think without vehicles and without road salt, it would be a relatively low amount.
We do have that number. Do I have it in my back pocket? But ongoing inspections and the like, as well as, yes.
All right, Chief Evan.
Just want to piggyback on my statement about the walkways. That's something we can't negotiate, correct? You have to have the walkways?
On the existing bridges?
Correct.
Yes, the commitment was, are you talking the sidewalks?
The old bridge.
It's going to be open on the old bridge for pedestrians and bikes, correct?
We are committed to pedestrians and bikes on the existing trusses.
And that's non-negotiable?
That is a non-negotiable.
But you're not going to provide lighting?
We are not providing lighting.
And you can handle us with a talk about that? That's a huge public safety concern.
I'm guessing if we're
There's
not
gotta be a way
gonna.
to negotiate that back somehow for weddings. If you're gonna have it open to the public, that's extremely dangerous to have those not like it.
So we take that under advisement, and I'm thinking there's lots of places where we have pedestrians that aren't lit. I mean, I guess the nuance would be it's a recreational facility, so lots of
And
parks.
then the short term, and the short term is what we're talking.
Oh, for now.
For now.
For
The next 2
like,
years.
right now. I will talk to the contract administrator who's up there and see what the status is. I didn't go over there tonight.
Alice Charles, Brattleboro, Vermont. Is maintenance going to include snow removal?
No.
All right, any other questions?
It's not so much a question as I think one of the things I've been confused about, and I don't mean to question New Hampshire DOT's research on your own property, but if you look at the FERC documents, in the FERC record, Great River Hydro submitted something called an Exhibit G, and it's Exhibit G maps that shows the property where they own land, like in fee ownership, and then where they have flowage easements. And according to their Exhibit G maps, they own the island. And so, which would be really convenient if it's true, but just, yeah, and so like, they may very well be wrong, but it might be worth really double checking who actually owns that.
I would love to know.
Can we charge back for it?
And on the further questions?
So just to wrap this up, weekend. I think we want to wrap things up tonight. Want to get your sense of whether next steps. I think David is eager to get some guidance on the bridges. If you're able to do that, if you feel you're able to do it, but wanting to get some feedback from the select boards about next steps, whether more time is needed, whether certain specific questions need to be answered. Curious to hear what you have to say.
More time is needed. I mean, this is new to us. I know this effort has been going on for years, but for us to make a decision on things is going to take some real thought and probably more communication. My own reaction at this point is to keep things simple and go slow, preserve the opportunities for the future, but do the work that needs to be done to protect the structures and protect those opportunities. But as far as, making a decision on what the purpose should be, we don't even know what the choices are at this point. We've heard the word lease repeatedly, but we don't really know what that means. And to come down in favor of that or against it, to me at this point, I just couldn't do that. So I think this is gonna take some time.
Well, on behalf of the Brattleboro Select Board and the people of Brattleboro, I really appreciate this meeting, but I feel that this meeting has kicked a sleeping dog. And there's so many fundamental questions that we all need to decide, but certainly a lot more conversation between Brattleboro and Hinsdale. And I appreciate and welcome those conversations with our colleagues across the river. I don't think we're in any way ready to make any decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I agree with a lot of what you just said there. I think also another thing that we need to take a look at both boards is the process for leasing, if that is to be an option, so that we can have some agreement on how to, entertain that. I don't like the sound of public property being talked about in private bathrooms.
Also, I think the board, Hinsdale board consensus is, even though David, I know you'd like an answer, but we feel that we need some more time too. It's been a while since we've discussed it. It's now being all brought up again. So some of the information that we've got today is a stimulus to get us thinking about it sooner than later, and I just think we need a little bit more time.
What would the more time look like? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but does it mean convening of the two select boards again, or does it mean a subset of you working through some questions?
Honestly, the state needs to step up and come up with a plan, you can ask 10,000 people what they want. 7 people say something, you put it on paper, that's what you do. What's the state of New Hampshire have? You own it.
They're all. You don't have all the microphones.
My desire would be the option on the left, downstream, 14-foot wide shared use path. That means the maximum space on the upstream side for whatever use the towns decide. And if you guys were to say that tonight, I'd walk away a happy guy, and my designers would keep cranking on. It's the limbo that leaves us just not advancing the design and not being able to move this process. So that's just my preference.
Thanks, Dave. I think to answer your question, maybe come back in a month.
Say that again?
A month. Get the two boards back together, hash out some of these questions. We have an election happening tomorrow in Brattleboro, so, there's 5 members sitting here, but it'll be potentially, a few different faces next time the boards meet. So get more time, more information for the public is really important. We haven't had a public meeting involving the two, legislative bodies. Thank you. So, let's have people catch up with this information. You guys have been doing a lot of really great work on it for years. I want to thank Patrick Mullen for the role he played in the existing Bridges Committee for a long time. But the public needs to have this information, be able to digest it, give us some feedback, so that we can kind of do the public's work. And it's not what the 5 of us think, it's really what the people of Brattleboro and the people of Hinsdale want.
Excuse me, I know, sorry, one comment is over, but just say. Hi, I'm Nadav Ali, Brattleboro. It seems that there's a lot of complicated questions here, and I've spent a lot more time with you to figure out a lot of things. This seems like a relatively simple question. I wonder if anybody here can see a good argument for splitting the 6-foot thing into 2 3-foot things on either side. If not, it seems like it could help the poor man make his decision and move on.
I vote for the one on the left.
I think it's better. Me too.
I second the one on the left.
Okay.
I feel like in one of the initial drawings done by UMass, there was a bike path that actually curved over the bridges, and part of the reason why is that it would slow down bikers, and so I'd love a little more creative thinking on this besides just necessarily a linear straight shot through, and there may be a way to do 6 foot on either side. In a curving path.
So you wasted property. You wasted a lot of money. Street roads are easier to build than curved roads.
Okay, I'll let you thank everyone for coming. I want to thank everyone for exciting conversation. There's more things that needs to be worked out. We look forward to meeting with the Brattleboro board again. That's a great idea. If you have questions, send questions to the Hinsdale board, the Brattleboro board, or if you have JPs or any other cards. And Catherine has our town administrator will have some information. We have the rest of our meeting to conduct. So anyone from Hinsdale or any place else wants to sit in for that, they can do that. We don't have a lot of business left. But once again, thank you all for coming and participating.